Right, so why do we break this into two sessions? Because there's two phases, and we covered a bunch of stuff in the first phase. So phase one, if you think about it, what we spoke about is text, right? So it is the chart summary, the document summary, and interaction via text via AI. The second phase, which we're building on top of, and we have ways for you to use this now in different ways, is around speech. So my reality as a GP, so I did my training scheme in RCSI. I did two really busy training practices with Mary Carmel Burke in Hart's Corner in Glasnevin, and then with Tony O'Brien in Bray. And it would not have been uncommon in Bray for me to see 40 or 45 patients a day, just mental. And then I worked with a famous practice out in Tala, where like you would see maybe 60 patients a day, and it was unlimited walk-ins. It was like absolutely great, and they wouldn't mind me saying that. But so I understand deeply, like I really get it, how tough it is as a principal. And when I joined my dad's practice in Galway, we went from seeing 20 patients a day to 200 patients a day in 24 months. So the reality for a lot of GPs and principals is you're first in, you're last out, like 9, 10 o'clock, like maybe I was just really inefficient, but you know, it'd be common for me to be there at nighttime, the last one out, and you're doing calls back and you're looking at labs and you're trying to do, like, you're updating notes from the day, and it's not nice, and it's not what I went to college for. I didn't go to college to spend most of my life spending on admin. They don't teach you that. And that's not to take away from the team members in the practice that do admin. It's just when you train to be a GP and you want to spend your time with patients, spending upwards of half or 40% of your time doing notes and documentation because you don't want to get sued and you want to make sure you're not making mistakes, it isn't great. So lots of backlogs, people logging in at weekends. You know, there's no such thing as a 3-hour session anymore, or 2.5 hours, it's 2.5 plus. And then, you know, EHRs and GP systems have been amazing. Like my dad, when he first started out, I remember working for him, and we would have the paper notes in the filing cabinet, and you take them out and the patient comes in, and some people still have that. But what EHRs have done, electronic health records, have meant you can be busier. Like you've got more admin and more work. There's Emmett Gilhooney, right? Emmett, so be very careful what you send on an instant message chat. At least it wasn't about me. Right, so where was I? I was talking about how bad it is being a GP. Look, it's a great job, and I loved it, and I have no regrets. But, you know, the computer screen has gotten between the GP and the patient. And that's just the way it is. It's the third person in the room. And I know when I write notes, I write defensively. I write, if this note was being reviewed by a opposing counsel and I was being cross-examined on it, how do I cover my ass? And you have to balance that with getting on to the next patient. So look, 10-minute consultations, a chunk of minutes trying to write your note, and then you're on, and it's stressful, right? So ambient AI services help cure these issues, right? That's how it's pitched, and that's why everybody is rushing to these services so quickly. And I would be shocked if most of the people in the room haven't tried some of those from UK and other providers. And to explain, just in case anybody doesn't know what ambient services are, the first time I used this, I was gobsmacked. And like the technology is moving so quickly that there's loads and loads of additional features, but at its core, a GP can have something listening in the background to them and a patient. And I could be having a consultation with Damien, and he could come into my room and we could have 15 minutes talking about the football and EastEnders or whatever it might be, and a lesion on his shoulder that I might give him a cream for and to tell him to back in 2 months, whatever. The ambient AI will take that audio file, convert it to text, summarize it, bring back a transcription, and then write a note that will, like a preview note of exactly what you'd write as a GP or close to it. So it means you only have to edit it. And it removes all of the stuff that was non-clinical or non-related. And you've got the transcript there to back it up. So it's an extraordinary use of AI. And it's been the first actually use of it that most practices would have experienced, because it's been browser-based, it's been available in the UK for a while now. And people have just flooded into it. And because of the pressures in practice, like desperate people do desperate things. And if you have a service that can get you out the door an hour earlier, like, you know, give it to me. That's the story from a lot of practices. It's like, I don't, not that they don't care where the data is going, but it's kind of almost secondary to getting out the door. So some pros, I won't read all this, but like just to ground it in some facts, right? It makes doctors happier, right? The first thing is it can reduce. Now, this was a study from the Mayo Clinic in 2022. Now this would have to do with charts related to hospital care, but it's not that dissimilar to GPs, right? But what they found is that there was a reduction in the amount of time it was taken to write a note with Ambient by 76%. Like even if it was 30% as a GP, we're still saving that 30-second per day, right? Absolutely. The second thing is that it makes doctors feel better, right? So 85% of physicians using Ambient. Now this was a Nuance sponsored survey, right? So Nuance is Microsoft and they're in AI. Of course they're going to say nice things, but like 85% is pretty categorical that it improved work-life balance. And I get it, because it means I'm spending less time trying to crank out the notes, writing the same note over and over again. And look, the GP systems, the GP systems do have templates. Like you can build templates, you can spend the time in there, but sometimes it takes as long to edit a template as it will be to write a note. The third thing is it improves patient experience. So there's a report called I can't even remember what HPS stands for, but it stands for some patient and consultation survey. Basically, it's a survey of how happy patients are at their interactions with the doctor. But there's a 10 to 15% improvement. So I think that's down to better eye contact, less focusing on the computer, and more engagement with the patient. You're not kind of jumping back and forth to the notes to make points. The fourth thing is that it reduces error rates. So by that I mean it can catch things that you might have missed in the consultation if it's a long drawn out consultation. So it'll kind of find things that maybe weren't the primary reason that were in there. And that happens to me in GP. Like practice consultations can start about a mole on your shoulder and end up with something completely different. But you can forget about the mole on the shoulder when someone has, suicidal ideation, and you spend most of the consultation on that. So really, really good for that. It can be useful. Now, we haven't started this yet. We're at the early days of experimentation on inserting clinical codes, but it can help codify the consultation as well. So looking and summarizing, it can go, oh, this consultation is about a patient with diabetes. And then we'll be able to do things like the pick lists in SDCs, where we'll be able to check if that patient's already coded with diabetes, and then we can flag it. Or it can even find consultation codes for the reason of the episodic care. So that structured searchable data is the next thing that we're moving into. And then it's scalable. So like you have all these good things, good for the patient, good for the practice, real-time capture, reduces errors. You'd ask yourself, well, like, what's the catch? And that's it. Like, what is the catch? All of these amazing things available now, some people are giving it away for free. And there's that old saying, like, if you are not paying for the product, you are the product. And the reason, well, first of all, there's a land grab going on, but also your data is very, very useful to large companies to help train these models. And training can mean a whole bunch of things, but that really sensitive consultation that you've just had with somebody goes up, and where is it actually going, and what does the shadow? And it's funny that these companies can be very, they can find very, very grey language to describe what's happening, because you'll hear them say, oh, we're HIPAA compliant and we're GDPR compliant and we don't do any training with your data. But then when you actually get under the hood, they use a secondary model for training, and they don't use your data, they use the transcription, which they call, anyway. The catch is the closed loop or an open loop. So where is the data going? What are you doing with it? And is it being permanently deleted? And someone needs to give you that reassurance in writing when it comes to this stuff, because we know that patients find the consultation notes and their interaction with the GP to be multiply more valuable to them than their bank account details, right? So that's the catch, is security and privacy. So earlier I spoke about phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1 is text. I know I'm repeating myself, but just to explain why. Text is the natural precursor to speech. And that might feel counterintuitive because everybody thinks AI is speech. But when you're managing speech, you have to first turn the audio into text. And then these large language models use the text of that transcription to then do the summarization. So it makes complete sense for us to do document